For another 500 rupees, the Brahmin boy advised them to go back to the king at a carefully chosen time and tell him the whole story. He told them, "If you approach him at the right time, when he's relaxed and in a good mood, he'll think it's funny and forgive you. But choose your time well. Make sure he's in a good mood." The merchant's son followed his advice. He went to the palace on a beautiful warm evening as the sun was setting. He felt that no one could be in a bad mood on a beautiful evening like this. It was after dinner, and he knew the king had eaten well, because kings always eat well. The guards presented him to the king. He was right. The king was in a very good mood. The merchant's son told him the whole story and begged for the king's forgiveness for doing such a silly thing. The king thought the story was very funny and forgave him. He told him not to worry, as everyone makes mistakes sometimes. When the merchant's son had left the palace, the king sat alone, thinking about the story. He was very curious about this Brahmin boy and his special talent, so he sent for the boy and asked him if he had any more wisdom to sell. The Brahmin boy said, "Of course. I have plenty to sell, especially to a king, but my wisdom isn't cheap. It will cost you 100,000 rupees. The king didn't hesitate. He paid him 100,000 rupees, and the Brahmin boy followed his usual routine. He sat, he thought, he looked carefully at the king's face, and then at the sky above. Then he took a deep breath, closed his eyes, opened them again, and wrote on a piece of the king's special paper. When he had finished writing, he folded the piece of paper, waved his hand over it 3 times, and gave it to the king. On the piece of paper, the king read the words, "Think deeply before you do anything." The king thought this advice was very wise, and he had it written in gold letters on all his royal plates and cups, and sewn on his fine pillows and sheets so he would never forget it. Some months later, the king became very sick. He didn't realize that one of his queens and his minister were planning his murder. As part of their plan, they had paid the king's doctor to put poison into his medicine. One night, when the king was taking his medicine, he lifted his golden cup up to his lips, and just before he started to drink, he noticed the words he had had written on the cup. "Think deeply before you do anything." Without suspecting anything, the king thought about the words, lowered his cup, and looked at the medicine in it. The doctor, who was standing there watching this, became very nervous. He was full of guilt and fear, certain that the king had guessed that his medicine was poisoned. While the king was lying there thinking, the doctor suddenly threw himself at his feet and cried, "Forgive me, my king!" Before the king could say anything, the doctor told him what the queen and the minister were planning and how they had involved him. He then began to cry and begged again to be forgiven. The king was completely shocked at first, but as soon as he had recovered, he called his guards and had the doctor locked up. He then sent for his minister and his wife. When the guards brought them into his room, the king told them what had just happened and that he had put the doctor in prison. His wife immediately said, "Oh, I'm so pleased. I always knew that man was crazy, but this wild story he's invented is proof." "Crazy, you say? Wild story, you say?" answered the king. "Let's see who's telling the truth. Drink my medicine." The queen immediately fell at the king's feet, admitted her guilt, and begged for his forgiveness. The minister just stood there silently, looking very depressed. The king ordered his guards to take them both away and cut off their heads. The Brahmin boy was then sent for by the king. When the guards brought the boy into his room, the king thanked him for saving his life. He made the boy his new minister and arranged for him to live in the palace. A fine apartment and beautiful clothes were prepared for him. The boy lived happily in the palace as a wealthy man of honor and remained the king's most trusted advisor for the rest of his life.